a Noble Media Group member.
America's known our share of tyrants. In response to tyranny, we created one of the greatest guiding documents ever written by mankind. We stood for what was right. We've also made mistakes, but we corrected those mistakes by fighting for what was right both inside our borders and beyond. Today, America faces another challenge: Christian nationalism. Misguided faith and misguided patriotism justifying misguided deeds.
Lord, turn the hearts of those who are in power and position to make decisions.
That's
not who we are, America. The Constitution is as true today as the day it was ratified. America stands for freedom, and America stands for doing what's right. And it's time we start restoring the American dream.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Restoring the American Dream. This is Brian Michel. I'm here with my dear friend Michael Factor. Of course, great to have you back again on Robert Church. I'm going to hand it over to Michael in just a second. I just want to say, I don't know if you're watching this from now, but Facebook or YouTube or X or Twitch or wherever it's from, welcome. If you like it, please give us a like. If you're on YouTube, subscribe to our channel at Noble Media Group. The same one with the little corner. And just a couple of other little things. We are growing big time. And so over the next week or two, you're going to see a lot of new people join us. You're going to see a lot of new shows, and it's an exciting time to be around us and what we're doing. So, with that said, let me hand this over to Michael, because the discussion tonight, although it's a little fun, it's also a very serious discussion, and it's a really deep dive into what's wrong with some of our politics. So, Michael.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, Brian, and Robert, it's always a pleasure to have you here with us, and I'm certainly looking forward to your perspective. And really, in some respects, in many respects, you two are experts at this. But I want to kind of capsulize this, if I can, in terms of we're talking tonight about campaign finance. I don't want to say reform, but campaign finances, how it happens, how it works, deep money, dark money. And what it is doing to our electoral process. And I'll just start out by saying this. We all understand that campaigns are financed by private individuals who give money. We understand, we know how that works. But what we don't know is that because of recent laws that have changed and developments and things that have morphed, that there are super PACs and people can give to those. And we understand how super PACs work, that they can't coordinate directly with the campaign. But what most people don't know is that billions of dollars in total are going into campaigns through dark money. That means there's nobody accountable. They give to a 501c4 or create a 501c4. They can give money to a 501c4, and that money can be used toward a campaign or a candidate without anybody knowing who gave that money or why. That could be from a foreign entity. It can be from a nefarious individual. It can be. And the reason that it matters is because it influences voters. And if we have enough money to influence voters in a way that is not in their best interest, or that sides with a special interest, it diminishes the electoral process. So with that said, Brian, I want to kick it over to you, because I know you've been in this both professionally and for some time. So
And so I want to deep dive before I do, and I'll give my background, but Robert, just give me a little bit of your background and experience with some of this as well, so that everybody that's watching this kind of understands, that the folks that are going to talk about some of these subjects, we've been there. And so, if you haven't noticed, and for those of you that really watch our shows, Richard is broadcasting from the usual setting. We're doing something for him. He's broadcasting outside of that, and so we want to do something different
We
tonight.
call it an undisclosed location. You know, like the old Dick Cheney line. I'm in an undisclosed location somewhere. I will say this. It's somewhere in New York City. Let's put it that way.
Is this a
So,
DSC right above your head? Is it, okay. I'm sorry.
well,
She's,
it's funny that you brought that up because my first major political experience was shortly after I graduated. Shortly after I graduated college, the 1988 was the big presidential year, and I was living in Annapolis, Maryland. I went to a small liberal arts college called St. John's College, and this couple moved in next door to me, and the husband was the finance director of the Republican National Committee, and we became
okay.
yeah. And at that time, I mean, you know, I was like shortly out of just out of college, and sort of had that vaguely I'm an immigrant and I'm black and so forth, and the Democrats are the good guys and the Republicans are kind of sketchy, that kind of thing. But I was always interested in politics, and I as I became friends with my next door neighbor, I asked him if it was possible to be a volunteer at the Republican National Convention, which was in New Orleans that year. This is 1988. George H.W. Bush, right? Yeah, George the First, and Phil was, as I said, he was the finance director. He was the big fundraising guy, and it was his second time around as the head of as the head of finance. So I went down there and just sort of helped shuttle around the major donors, the ones that were giving $10,000, $15,000 a year. And then after the election, I got a full time job at the RNC at the Republican, and that was my introduction to big time politics, and I ended up working with the RNC for 5 years that first time around, always in finance, and that was great education in terms of getting insight to how money is raised, the different types of levels you have in it, and one of the great phrases that I learned there was from the then chairman of the RNC in the late '80s, a guy by the name of Frank Fahrenkopf, who he started out as like the chairman of the Nevada Republican Party, and then became chairman of the RNC. And his phrase was, "Money is the mother's milk of politics," meaning that it's a thing that nourishes you, and without it, your campaign and your candidacy is going to be dying in the swaddling crib, and that's very very much true.
Yes.
Fundraising, raising money, because you need to raise the money to get one's message out. And there have been so many different interpretations going back to, and Brian, you may want to get into this. It was coming out of a number of the shall we say, indiscretions of the Nixon era. There was a groundbreaking Supreme Court decision in, I believe it was 1978, called Buckley versus Vallejo, which placed various restrictions and regulations on both the raising of money in local races as well as national races, and also how the campaigns could raise it, the limitations on individuals giving, and also on how campaigns and parties could spend it in what levels. And really, basically, everything since Buckley versus Vallejo has been a new and different interpretation and reinterpretation as the Supreme Court steadily moved further to the right and kind of took apart a lot of those regulations, and each party then reinterpreted how to get around whatever the rules and regulations were, and then they started always pointing at each other as to who was cheating more in terms of raising the money or spending the money, and so forth, and which of course brings us to what you wanted to talk about, Brian, Citizens United, which sort of kind of blew up whatever that whole structure that had really existed since 1978.
Let's take time with that. And for those that are watching, there's no need to talk about this subject without getting into the weeds a little bit. So I must apologize. There may be some things you won't understand. I'll try to speed through them just a little bit. First of all, I want to point out this is for federal candidates that we're going to be talking about. So states have some different rules that the state candidates may have to work under. For federal candidates, we're going to lay out some specifics. And the goal of this is to understand the unintended consequences of Citizens United. If you're a federal candidate, you must register with the FEC. That's the Federal Election Committee, or Federal Election Committee, I believe that's right. And that sets out the rules by which you as a candidate can raise money, how it's raised, how it's reported, and so forth. And there's limitations as a candidate how much a person can give you. And it's based upon not just your primary, but also the general election. So I'm not going to dive too deep in that. The goal of the FEC is to make sure that people that are going to vote for candidates do not vote for them understand that they are getting their funding. So why is this important? Because the amount of money that you raise is going to also dictate the amount of attention you get from the press. And the amount of attention you get from the press is also going to dictate the amount of money that you're going to raise. And that's more or less true from the beginning of politics in the last 50 years. So here's what changed. And I'll share a couple of slides and I'll share a video, and we're going to deep dive it for a second. So let's start with the slide first, if I can. Super PAC. So a super PAC, and I'm going to make the whole thing, I'm just kind of touching on what Wikipedia says. But super PACs are a type of political action committee. That's a PAC. The states. Unlike traditional PACs, super PACs are legally allowed to fundraise unlimited amounts of money from individuals or organizations for the purpose of campaign advertising, however, they are not permitted to either coordinate with or contribute directly to a candidate, campaign, or political parties. So, let's go back to that for just 1 second. Super PAC, what does it do? You can fundraise $10 of money, but you can't coordinate with the candidate. Let me just tell you, it doesn't happen that way. Okay, we'll explain that in a second. PAC, super PAC.
There's coordination going on here. I'm shocked.
Yeah, and I'll give you some really good examples of where it's totally bullshit. Because I was one of those that became a thing out of Citizens United. Now, he found a short video, I think it's CBS, and they're going to touch about they're going to touch about dark money, and we're going to talk about it, and we're going to go back between the we're deep why this was such a big deal. So let's hear that if I can, and you're going to show the first video, and we'll chat about it.
This investigation is shedding light on dark money in political campaigns and the role they're already playing in this year's election. Those are donations that are made where the source and the donor are undisclosed. CBS News investigative reporter Daniel Kleidman has been following the story, and he is here with us now in Studio 57 to explain what he found. Always great to have you, Daniel. You write about a single anonymous donation of $64 million that helped Joe Biden get elected in 2020. What do we know about the source of that funding and how it was made its way into the primary Biden super PAC?
Well, we know almost nothing about the source of that funding, which is why this is an important story. Look, in July of 2020, a 501c4 tax-exempt organization that no one had ever heard of just kind of popped up out of the blue and received a donation for $64 million from a single anonymous source. That is a staggering amount of money. Most people believe it came from one very wealthy pro-Biden individual, but it could have come from another entity, from a privately held corporation or from an LLC, but we just don't know. That money then moved from the Impetus Fund, which was this 501c4, to the nonprofit arm of the main Biden super PAC called Future Forward USA Action. Now, 501c4s, these tax-exempt organizations, they don't have to say who their donors are. But a few weeks later, in October, just before the election, $60 million was moved from Future Forward USA Action to Future Forward, which is the Biden super PAC. Super PACs do have to disclose who their donors are. But the donor in this case was their nonprofit arm.
Right, which we don't know.
Right. No one knows what Future Forward USA Action is or who's behind that. And so, you know, good government groups and people who are concerned about the lack of transparency in the system are really concerned about this trend, which has been going on for quite a while now.
So let's talk about that real quickly. Super PAC. Super PACs can take unlimited amounts of money from a limited amount of people. They can spend as much money as they want in support or against a candidate. But remember, the super PAC, if you give one penny to a super PAC, it's to bring it back to the VC. So the super PACs, they cannot do anything with the candidate. They can't directly work with the campaign. And they're an anonymous outside organization that can coordinate it all. Let's talk about the video we just watched. That's what it's called. It's a very unsafe and fair transparency because somebody must watch our show's going to look it up. Yes, I will. That's 501c4. Okay, so do this. Somebody's going to say he's talking. Yeah, so 501c4. If you donate money to a 501c4, I don't have to tell you who gave me the money. So what's writing a $1 million check, $100 million check, after that gets reported back to the FEC. It's dark money. Why is it dark money? Because no one knows how much the donation came from.
Does the donor receive a tax benefit?
So, as a non-profit, the donor in general does not receive a tax benefit. And that 527, which is a PAC, so a PAC action committee, is 527. Technically, 527 is also a non-profit, and everybody knows you can't what you give to a candidate. So here's how the process works. You take a 501c4 that's dark money. Somebody gives me 10, 15, $100 in 501c4. I take that from 501c4 and I put that over to a super PAC. Where do I come from? Where Brian came from, who's giving money? Is it domestically? Is it from the Flying Putin? Is it from Pfizer? Is it from Elon Musk? You don't know. And so that's how the process works. That's how dark money works. And that's what Citizens United inadvertently opened up. doing what they did. And so,
Well, my question is, Brian, you say inadvertently, but was it really inadvertent? I mean, the key issue that I understood in terms of the context of Citizens United was you had a group that wanted to run a sort of a hit video
mhm.
against Hillary Clinton in 2016, I think it was, or 2014, not even before the campaign. And they that group was, the name of the group was Citizens United. They were sued because by the interpretation of the law before this case came down, they were seen as a corporation, and at that time, corporations could not
That's right.
contribute directly to campaigns, or give indirectly to campaigns and unions, which is actually very important, because there are many folks on the left who say, well, it's outrageous. We've given all this power to the corporations in terms of the amount of money that they have in the political process. But they also weaponized or gave a lot of power to unions, which at that time were almost exclusively giving to Democrats. So that's changed a little bit in the last few years.
So, go ahead,
Yeah,
Michael.
let me kind of, you're right. We're in the weeds.
Try not to be.
It is hard not to be, but how does that impact the everyday voter and in the election process? We because we believe in fair elections. We believe in that votes count, and we want to see every person have their democratic process. We want to see the democratic process play out. We know that costs money. We know the money has to come from somewhere, and corporations are at the table. They're belly up at the trough, so to speak. Okay, so we know that. What can we do? What should we as citizens involved in the electoral process, what should we be looking for? What maybe we could have each candidate give a disclosure on how much dark money they're receiving from their or not receiving, because they could all say, I don't know, because it's not coordinated. I'm not supposed to know. I can't know. And if they did know, then they would be in violation of the FEC law. So yeah, go ahead.
So I'll clarify a few things about what's important so folks understand. The entire point of the FEC and contributions to candidates is that a person can buy a legislative seat, can go to someone that's running as a youth senator and give him $1 million, $2 million and say, knock it out. Okay? So the whole point of the FEC is, number one, it restricts the amount of money that a candidate can have and use. And number two, it requires full disclosure. And just gave so-and-so $5,600. Okay? So the point of it was to restrict a person's or a corporation's ability to buy an election. Citizens should change that, because for most people, for most of America, the money that you have that you could put in towards an election is limited. Okay, I mean, for the average Joe, that's not necessarily the case if you're a corporation. You have application ability to get into much larger funds. But the deeper issue is that once you coordinate and you take spots and favor putting what to do with some money and no one knows where it came from, and you give that to a super PAC, even don't give it to a super PAC. And so here's the impact it makes. If you're running for Congress or district, you have to get your name out there, right? You have to go on the air. You have to go you have to go on the radio. You have to go on to television and the cable. Well, there's only 24 hours on TV. How can that up and completely lock the other person out from even being able to compete in it? That's where logic comes in heavily.
I do want to. I think there are the two really key points in this campaign finance discussion. Going back, I mentioned at the top of the show the Buckley versus Vallejo decision in the 1970s. The key point that happened in that is that the Supreme Court made the determination that money equals speech, and to the extent that money equals speech, that limitations on how money is donated and spent has to be weighed in the context of the First Amendment. So at that point, because prior to that, it was seen that money was just basic money, and if you're giving too much of it to a politician, it has the appearance of bribery. But once they made that determination of money equaling speech, that changed the ball game right there. Then what campaign finance did was it basically established that corporations, to use the wonderful phrase of Mitt Romney, corporations are people too, my friends. And so you've got this context where corporations have the exact same free speech rights as an individual does, and money is a form of speech. And so there has to be distinct rules and limitations on how much limitation you can put on people community campaign.
So Michael, I got to ask the let's call it analogy takeover. So the question to you, if you're watching this, what's the point of VC anymore? If you fund it, you can easily fund it.
Right.
501c4. What's the point? That's where I'm going with this. Go ahead, Michael.
Well, we need to understand that most voters, the vast, where this plays into account now, even more than it did before, is because before voters could be counted on along party lines. Now that is no longer the case. We have a tremendous amount of independent voters or voters who have dropped out altogether. So the electorate is really spread out, which in many ways is kind of dangerous in the sense that people aren't really paying attention to who they're electing. And if they're not paying attention to who they're electing or who they're voting for, then they're not going to really be paying attention to what bills are passed, what laws are passed, and what they're actually doing in the state capital or the city capital or the nation's capital, what they're supposed to be doing, and the reason that we send them and have an elective government to begin with. So it all comes back down to accountability. We need accountability. And if they're owned by a corporation, they're not going to be accountable to their district. If they've gotten $50 million from a super PAC, whose call do you think they're going to return first? Grandma Jones who called, or the XYZ chair of the board from the super PAC? Well, we know the answer to that question. Yeah.
I am going to disagree with you slightly, though, Michael, because I think we should also take a look. You are absolutely right that the power of the parties has weakened because more and more voters are seeing themselves as independent. I would say that one of the ramifications of Citizens United and some of the decisions before it is that. I think one could make the argument that politics was in a better place when the parties actually had more control. The fact that things have become more diffuse now, and the money is going more from individuals to the candidates, means that it's a whole lot harder for the parties to control their own to control their own candidates, which I think which seeing what's happened over the last 10 to 20 years. I think we can all agree that's ultimately been a bad thing.
So like, when I kind of do something out so that the people watching this can understand something, because you hear this every single election cycle. I don't take corporate money. Take money from billionaires. I don't take, this, that, or the other. Average donation that's $5 from the Catholic store. We do that every single time. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter, folks. Let me tell you why. Because it's not what influences the elections. It's the CFOs and super PACs that do it. And there's corporate money. It's super big money. And the candidate has no ability to say yes. And so that's breaks elections. And we don't have a good solution to fix it. It would probably mean a much stronger FEC would require Congress to set much more strict limits on it and pass big legislation. They have to pass big legislation that cuts off their own money flow.
Right.
So
But,
just like
Brian, you have to keep in mind that the Congress would ultimately still be limited by the Supreme Court's determination of what can be given and what can be restricted. That's the whole idea of citizen. The Congress can't. There are a lot of Democrats saying, "I'm going to overturn Citizens United," but to try and overturn Citizens United, you'd have to get it passed through the Congress, and then essentially get us a. Well, no, essentially you'd have to get you'd have to get an amendment, a constitutional amendment passed, because it's seen as an extension of the First Amendment.
100%. It's just like tolerance. Everybody says, "Hey, no tolerance." Like some rights have 2 terms. And then 30 years now, I wish I could pass them. It's bullshit. Because the is not going to happen. You've got to get people that are in office to put their life off. You've got to get people that are in office. This legislation actually makes Congress work. It doesn't happen. So it's a really sad and bad place that we're in as a country. Our solutions, that's kind of restoring our American dream, in my opinion, Michael, young citizens, changing our politics and making big changes, because as it is right now, my friend, it's broken. So, I apologize to everybody. I apologize to you up front. I know this is going to be an alien lines discussion. Again, it was not really irrelevant. I want to be the one that's just sitting here talking. But Michael, if you've got any last thoughts that you want to put out, let's do that. Then we'll say goodnight.
No, we need to restore the American dream. The American people have got to be in control. We, the people, have got to be in control. We keep coming back to that because that's where the American dream lies, and our ability to speak and our ability to have our voices heard individually and yes, collectively. Collective impact is okay, but when you can't see who's throwing the rocks, you can't defend, or you don't know which direction you're coming from. You can't defend yourself. So it's important. So thank you for watching, everyone. Thank you. Please like us, love us, share us with someone that you know and care about. Restoring the American Dream is on Tuesdays and Thursdays from this time, and you can catch us live or on repeat at the No Bull Media Network.
Just thanks everybody for joining. It's always a pleasure. So we throw the words to the show. There's nothing to do this without getting into the weeds. But let's talk about maybe this next time. Let's do. What are some options that we might be able to do that are realistic? It could change some of this. That would be a good discussion. I don't have the answers, but maybe family, my friend. Michael, thanks again, everyone. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you this next time.
You've been watching Reverend Michael's Restoring the American Dream. The No Bull Media Group is on all major social media platforms. Make sure to give us a follow so you can watch this show and many others.
a Noble Media Group member.